This video is brought to you by Against the Flow of Mississippi. Against the Flow of Mississippi is a book about Jake Fayard, a Marine veteran who is unhappy with the political machine running the state of Mississippi. He decides to fight the corruption from the inside. Jake will face more challenges than he ever has and will stand up for what he thinks is right. His notoriously hot temper will push him to the edge of murder, along with his friend and brother Kobe Barhanovich. Together, they will fight the system and give the power back to the citizens of Mississippi. Against the Flow of Mississippi is now available on Amazon. A link to the book will be placed in the description below.
Count time on the compound. All inmates return to bunks. Beyond the Count, Life on the Compound. Brought to you by former Sergeant Allen of the Florida Department of Corrections. On this YouTube channel, I will explain to you the ins and outs and the do's and don'ts of a prison. Hope y'all enjoy. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you are a brother or sister correctional officer, y'all remember, be safe, and we never walk alone.
Alright, y'all, good morning. This video series is going to be sporadic at best. Reason is because of the way our shifts work. I work night shift. It's going to be real sporadic. So I'm doing another video on the same day that I made the first one. Anyway, people, I want to do something on inmate manipulation. Now, an inmate's job is to get over on you. You're an officer. You're going to do your 8 and hit the gate. Do your 12, whatever. The old adage is do your 8 and hit the gate. But what happens after you do that 8 and hit the gate? Do you think inmates forget about you? No. I would venture to guess that many of y'all, when you work corrections after a while, you're not going to be thinking about inmate Leroy and Bubba. Because Leroy and Bubba, you're not going to know them on a personal level. Maybe you might. If you do know them on a personal level, well, I'll get to that later. But Leroy and Bubba locked up 24 hours a day. They have nothing better to do for 24 hours than to think about how to get over on you. I'm going to read an article here. This article is dated 2013, and it's on Corrections 1. And it was written by a jail administrator in Seminole County, Florida, which is Sanford, Florida. It's down by Orlando. This rings true. Now, this person has been doing this longer than I've been alive that wrote this article. In 2013, well, actually, the article is called How to Manipulate Correctional Officers. Inmates refer to manipulation as downing of a duck, where the duck is a correctional officer who is easily fooled. I'm going to read the article and then I'm going to talk about it for a while. So this may be a long video. In 2013, news broke of corruption in Baltimore correctional system as it was disclosed that the leader of the Black Guerrilla family was manipulating staff and managing his gang operations from behind the walls. Not only was he running his criminal enterprise, selling drugs, smuggling in cell phones, and racketeering, but he was able to manipulate staff and impregnate 4 female officers. 2 of the officers had his name tattooed on them. How do staff members fall for this? What can correctional officers do to stop the corruption? How inmates manipulates correctional officers. Throughout my career, I have seen inmates manipulate staff. I have seen staff with tremendous potential fall victim to an inmate's con game. Inmates have a process they use to manipulate staff to get them to do what they want. It's similar everywhere. Author Bud Allen and Diana Bosta referred to this as downing a duck. The duck refers to a staff who are easily manipulated or fooled. First, inmates groom a staff member. They say things like, "You're the only one who has made a difference in my life. I can tell you're a better officer than all the others. You should have heard what Officer Smith said about you." These kind words make staff feel good about themselves and what they're doing and provide them with a sense of purpose. I'm going to stop right here. You know how many inmates I've had walk up and say, "Hey, Sergeant Allen, you're the best CO I ever met." And my response is, "Thank you. Appreciate that." Now grab that wall. Why am I doing this? Why am I telling that inmate to grab the wall? The reason I'm doing this is simple. Number one, establish dominance. I'm the correctional officer, and I understand manipulation. 2, what's his con game? Inmates don't hand out compliments for no reason. They don't. I want to know what he's doing. He's trying to take my attention off of something. And I look at it like this. He wants my attention, so I'm going to give him my attention. I'm going to pat search him. I don't care if I do the same inmate 5 times a day. I'm going to get him, and if he's in a group, I'm going to get everybody in that group, or as many as I can. I mean, if it's a mass movement and I've got 400, 500 on the yard, obviously I can't get all of them, but I can get the 5 or 6 around him. Hey, grab a wall. You. Grab a wall. That's what I'm going to tell you. Grab a wall. Well, why? Because Y comes before Z. I don't have to have a reason to search you. I'm searching you, number one, for my safety. Number 2, because you up to something and I want to know what it is. I nip it in the bud. I'm going to go ahead and full disclosure. I lived in Miami for around about a year and a half. Everybody knows Miami's got some of the most beautiful women you will ever see. It's the truth. I would say that Miami Miami's got to rank at least in the top five of the most beautiful women in the world. You know, I live in Mississippi now. A Miami, gonna put it like this: a Mississippi 10 is about a Miami 6 at best. Well, using that similar scale, a woman on the street that's about a 2, and I'm not picking on female officers. I know some damn good female officers. I've worked with some of the best. But I've also seen a lot of women get caught up in this, and I'm specifically addressing inmates impregnating female officers when I'm talking about this. I am not talking bad about female officers at all. I've got a lot of respect for female officers. If you've got the fortitude to step behind the gate, God bless you. I love you, and I've got your back every day. This is not a knock on gender. I am not sexist by any means. I don't believe in it. I was raised by my mother and my grandmother. I had 2 women raise me to be the man that I am today. So I am not saying that women are incapable of doing the job. Now, I said that to say this. On the street, if a woman is a 2, in prison, she's a 10. I'm not going to mention any names, but at the same time I was in the academy in Rayford, Florida, there was a girl who was in the academy class right ahead of mine. They were about 2 weeks ahead of us. And she worked at the same institution I worked at. My academy class had people from about 4 different institutions. Well, this particular one worked at the institution I worked at. Well, shortly after I transferred to Miami and promoted to sergeant down there, I'm still in contact with quite a few people in Rayford where I started. And I found out that this particular officer literally got caught with her pants down in the staff bathroom with an inmate. That female officer is now a convicted felon. She is a sex offender. She is done. She will never work corrections again. Never work corrections again. She lost her job. Now this particular former officer is now on supervised release. Again, I'm not going to mention names. At another one in Miami, she kept talking about her boyfriend. And this woman was very homely looking. And that's what inmates look for: low self esteem. Well, she got caught in the classroom in the act with an inmate. Now, free world people are like, well, they got to get it somewhere. Inmates cannot consent to sex. There's a federal law on this. It's called PREA, Prison Rape Elimination Act. They cannot consent to sex. So what I'm saying to you is these officers, now former officers, raped these grown men by law. I'm going to continue. Next, the inmate gets the staff member to lower their guard. It get them to share information they should. Something seemingly benign detail about their life can become a reason for extortion. Inmates will try to chat you up. They're studying you. And I'm going to tell you about Inmate.com. And when I say Inmate.com, I'm talking about the inmate grapevine, how fast news travels through with inmates across the compound. My 33rd birthday, I was working at New River Correctional Institute at the work camp. I was working in Charlie Dorm, which is the furthest dorm from the parking lot. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to give you the layout of the institution. I bought a 2009 Ford Mustang. I parked it in front. Now, a dorm could see the parking lot. They could see what every officer drove, what they pulled up in. By the time I made it out of my car back to the dorm, I had an inmate walk up to me and go, "Officer Allen, that's a really nice red Mustang you just pulled up in." Huh? I was new. I didn't understand. I'd been on the job less than a month, right about a month. I upgraded from a 1985 Ford F-150 to a 2009 Ford Mustang. Major upgrade, by the way, for me. I was proud of that car. Inmate.com. Inmates new. Inmates will know what you drive. They will know what you do. They will know what you like, what kind of music you like. They will chat you up. They will try to establish common ground. Continuing. For example, a staff member shares with an inmate that he or she is having a relationship with another staff member. I'll address this after I read this paragraph. The inmate takes the ball and runs with it. He blackmails the staff member into first doing something simple: looking the other way when misconduct occurs, mailing a letter, permitting a bunk move, or allowing an inmate to get a pass he shouldn't have. First off, don't crap where you eat. It's unprofessional. Really, dude? Let me pause this. I'm sorry y'all had to see that. That was a brother of mine staying over here, and well, mm, crazy Puerto Rican people. Put a shirt on. I'm sorry y'all had to see that. Step that way. Go that way. Back, yes. There we go. Thank you. You're out of my shot. See what I got to deal with? Anyway, once a staff member requests, or once a simple request a staff member complies with, her on the hook. Once hooked, the inmate uses these as bargaining chips to get the officer to do bigger and better things. Bring in cell phones, drugs, or get involved in a sexual relationship. He gets a staff member to over identify with the inmates and under identify with his professional peers. Sometimes, by virtue of the staff member's job, they can over identify with the inmate population. They begin to see inmates as peers, not people under their care, custody, and control. You see this in non security positions as well. For example, a maintenance staff member who has been working with an inmate welder for months begins to see him more as a co worker and less as a convict. This opens the door. Duck to be down. Inmates watch every move we make. They see our strength, but they also see our weaknesses. They prey on those weak points. They learn our personalities and squeeze us when they can. As correctional officers, we need to take steps to stop the downing of ducks and to make sure our co-workers are always practicing integrity. Stop you there. Convict asked you about your personal life. You were under no obligation to give him any information. Hey, officer, you married? None of your business. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. Who cares? What do you care? What are you taking a poll? How to address inmate manipulation of correctional officers. First, report everything. I'd rather have a staff over-report. If it quacks, it's probably a duck. If you notice a staff member spending extra time with a particular inmate, report it. Remember, all inmates don't lie all the time. If they tell you something, you have a duty to look into the issue. You better believe it. Officer down in Florida. I noticed not long after I got there that she would spend a lot of time with this particular inmate. Honestly, I probably helped her keep her job a little longer than I should have because I told the captain, keep her ass out on perimeter. The reason I said keep her on perimeter was because I didn't want her to be doing what I suspected she was doing and what she eventually got caught. Second, the administration of the facility must be visible. You can't run a prison from behind a desk. Walk and talk daily. Visit all shifts. Know your staff and know your inmates. When you discover wrongdoing, take swift action when holding people accountable. If the administrators let things slide, that will become the culture at your facility. No truer words ever written about corrections than what I just read exist. More on that later. Pre-screen employees. Screen for gang affiliation, self-esteem, and reliability. Provide clear and direct pre-service training. Teach staff to identify games criminals play. Advocate for staff cohesiveness. That is one of the most important things you can do. We want to prevent staff from over identifying with the inmates and make sure they see their peers as important. Be clear in your expectations. Be clear in what your expectations are, both in the inmate population and your corrections professionals. Although we will never totally get rid of staff misconduct, I'm convinced we can do it. The blatant and criminal behavior displayed by those working in the Baltimore prison system was unacceptable. It flies in the face of professionalism, and it puts the public safety at risk. Shame on those people for disgracing our profession. I love this article. I love this article. I've seen so many new officers, and I have gave them this article to read. Sadly, the mentality of correctional officers is they don't read stuff like this. Now, let me tell you my examples of inmate manipulation and how to stop it. I'm not saying you got to be a complete hard ass. You don't have to. You don't have to come in there and be a tyrant with inmates. You don't need to talk down to inmates. Be firm with them, but you don't need to go gung ho with them. But if you enforce the institutional rules, regulations, you read the inmate handbook, you know the inmate handbook. When I got this job up here in Mississippi, one of the first things I asked for two things: copy of the security policies and procedures, because that's my job, and copy of the inmate handbook. I wanted the inmate handbook as opposed to the staff handbook. Staff handbook I wanted too, don't get me wrong. But the reason I wanted the inmate handbook is the inmate handbook is going to tell you exactly what you need to know. It's going to tell you what the inmates' rules and expectations are, usually coming from the warden. If you don't know their rules, you can't enforce it. Now, that being said, knowing the rules and knowing how your sergeant or your officer in charge wants things done is two different things. If your sergeant says nobody nobody gets any extra TB, nobody, and the inmates come up to you and say, "Can we finish watching this movie?" Personally, I have no problem if they have behaved themselves in allowing them to watch the rest of the movie. I'm good with it. But I'm going to follow the rules of my sergeant, my officer in charge, because I have orders to follow. And if he says 11 o'clock, shut it all down, the answer is no. Now, if you are a new officer and you don't know how it works, let me go ahead and lay it on the line for you. My favorite word is no. I don't care what they ask me. If I don't know 100% certain that they're supposed to have it, the answer is no. Doesn't matter what it is. Sarge, can I go off for rec? I just, I was in the shower when you had rec call. No. Can you call? No. Well, why not? No. That's my favorite word. No. Learn how to say no and mean it. No. Keep pushing me. I'm going to give you a DR. Why am I getting a DR? Disrespect to an officer, you're badgering me. That ends it right there, whether you write the DR or not. Now, here's the other thing, too. If you sell that ticket, you better cash it. In Florida, I've got no problem putting an inmate in confinement for a rules violation, depending on the severity. In fact, they used to call me in Miami, they called me hook 'em and book 'em. because I would violate the rules. If it was something that I knew the captain would have my back on, you're going to confinement. I'm going to write the DR. I'm going to place you in hand restraints. I'm going to pack your property, and I'm going to move you from your assigned housing unit to administrative confinement, pending discipline. And I'll let the DR team decide whether you're going to stay in confinement under disciplinary confinement or whatever. If confinement was full, which usually was because of my efforts, and there was a captain's efforts that he didn't mind locking them up, and there was a couple of other officers. One of them I trained didn't mind locking them up either. And brother, if you watching this, you know who you are. I miss you, man. I love you. Good job. Keep up the good work. I've got no problem. If an inmate tries to manipulate you, write them a DR. If your facility has the space for it, put them in confinement. If you stop that one from manipulating you, you've not stopped him from just manipulating you, but you've also just saved another officer's career who may not be as aware of what you're aware of. If you're going to sell that ticket, cash it, and you better be able to. For the purposes of Florida Department of Corrections, it takes an OIC signature to put one in confinement. You have another option too. You can write them a walking DR, which means they'll still go before the DR team. DR is a disciplinary report, by the way. They'll still go before the DR team, which is a classification officer and a lieutenant or a captain, and they'll decide what to do with them from there. Again, speak to your sergeant, speak to your OIC, go through the chain of command before you initiate such things. But I have not seen one OIC that has any problem locking one up for trying to manipulate staff. Stop it, nip it in the bud. You will not tolerate it, and you let them know. You can see I smoke. I've had inmates come up to me and say, "Sarge, drop it on the ground. Come on, drop the cigarette on the ground." My response is cuff up. You're going to confinement. You just asked me to give you a contraband cigarette. It's not contraband for me to possess it on the compound, according to entry and exit procedures. Again, this is specifically dealing with Florida. It's not contraband for me to possess it, but it is for you to possess it. You're going to confinement. Or at least I'm going to write you a walking DR. For asking me for a cigarette, I'm probably not going to lock you up. But you're probably going to get a walking DR. Or I have other ways of manipulating inmates. One of my favorite things to do is make that inmate lose all his friends. Which means very simply, I will go into the dorm, find that inmate that asked me for a cigarette, I will single him out, and I'll search everybody around him and leave him alone. Nobody likes to be searched. You're in prison. You don't have that right not to be searched anymore. I don't need to beat the crap out of somebody or put my hands on them, violate the law, violate policy. Everything I can do is well within policy. know your institution's policy, and use it to your advantage. Again, what works for me may not work for you. My reputation speaks for itself. I step up and I do things the way I do things for a reason. I've been doing them for years. I had a very good trainer. Very good trainer. The sergeant that trained me is now a lieutenant. And he taught me a lot. And I hope he sees this video. There's so many ways that you could stop yourself from becoming a victim of manipulation. Stop yourself from crossing the line from correctional officer to convicted felon. It's too easy not to. Unless you like ramen noodles and honey buns, you don't want to be a victim of manipulation. I'm going to leave you with this thought. Give an inmate exactly what he's supposed to have, nothing more, nothing less. If they're supposed to have it, if they want a grievance, give them a grievance. If they want an inmate request, give them an inmate request. If they want an ibuprofen or non-aspirin or antacid, give it to them as long as it's within policy. Give them whatever they're entitled to have. If the state says you're supposed to issue it to them, give it to them. There you go. I'm going to grieve you. I'm going to write a grievance on you. This is what I do. This is exactly what I do. Make sure it's spelled properly. Make sure it's spelled properly. Because I don't care about a grievance. I'm doing my job. You don't like the way I'm doing my job. I'm following policy. Again, I'm not saying put your hands on an inmate. I am not. I will never tell y'all to do that. Unless you have a very good just cause for using force, don't do it. I'm also not saying that you put inmates over other inmates. That too is a violation of policy and a violation of the law. But what you can do is you can stop manipulation by turning it around on them, or simply reporting it to your OIC, or reporting it to your sergeant. Go through your chain of command. See what your institutional rules are on it. Every institution's different. I've worked several. You watch my first video, you know where I've worked. Every institution is different. Every OIC, every sergeant is different. Don't be the guy that goes to jail because you fell into the trap. Y'all be safe out.